Hey guys, and welcome back to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am Ray Russell, and this week we're going to talk about the fallout, I guess you could say, of the Hall of Fame in Waterloo. We're going to talk about Bob all about that. We're also going to have maybe a little tribute here. Bob's memories or thoughts on the passing of the Hulkster himself, Hulk Hogan, passing away last week, and let's welcome him back onto the show right now for that and a whole lot more. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, Bob Roop.
Well, thank you, Ray. I heard you say something about passing out. By the time I got to Waterloo, I was passing in. I barely had the strength to check into. I made a mistake of driving the whole 500 miles down there by myself. Usually I take Kyle.
By yourself?
9 hours.
Whew.
Yeah, hour and a half just to get around Chicago. So it was 9 hours, and I did it. I made it, except I'm not like I did it when I was 30 doing it. Doing it at 83, I was a wreck for the next couple of days. And there was another factor that'll go into anything I'm telling you. When I got there, I found out that the museum itself, they had, I think the bathrooms weren't working or something. It was open, like for fans to go down there, but everything else was going on at the convention center right across the street from the hotel. In fact, there was a walkway 2 floors below where my room was, and I could walk over there as opposed to even to go to the museum. I usually had to walk about a quarter of a mile from my room to the garage where my car was to drive to the museum. My problem now is, I'm okay on my feet, but I can't walk very far without really getting tired. I need to get back into, after not doing something for a long time, you lose your ability to do it. I'm going to get back. I'm going to get it back. I had all my medical checks done. Everything's fine. I don't have COPD. So, sorry out there for any haters. There might be still out there left, but I'm in pretty good health for any age. So I'm looking forward to carrying on as long as I can. So where do you want to go, my friend?
Well, you spent years driving up and down the roads, so I guess that 9-hour drive wasn't the end of the world, but I mean, I can only imagine. I'm not a fan myself of driving for distances that long, but to make the trip out there and back on your own, I say kudos to you on that. But however, let's talk about your time there and some of the experiences that you had while you were there. We could start wherever you want. You want to talk about some of the legends that you may have came in contact with, or talk about the fans?
Let's start with the fans, because without the fans, I doubt very seriously if many of the older legends like myself might not go. If I knew for sure that Baron Raschke wasn't going, I still might go, because I have some other friends down there that are more fan than wrestler, than that were actual wrestlers. But, anytime you go and be around, I mean, talking about real friends, people that back you up no matter what the situation is. Mm-hmm. But the Baron, especially, he's a couple of years older than me. He's 85. And it's funny, about 2 or 3 years ago, he started to get a little bit wobbly on his feet, and I hadn't gotten there yet. Well, I'm starting to catch up to him. I'm at the wobble stage. He's at the really wobbly stage, but he's got a lovely daughter, Heidi, who comes with him, and she's just the most sweetest daughter a guy could have and friend. She makes sure that he stays safe and everything. But Jim's the kind of, our Baron, I think of him as Jim because I met him as Jim Raschke, but I should call him the Baron. The Baron, like when people want to pay to have a picture taken with him, he'll stand up. He won't. They'll say, "Oh no, I'll crouch down next to you." He says, "No." He'll stand up and put out the cloth for them and everything, and give them their full $10 or $15 worth, whatever they paid. So he's a real trooper and a really good man. I mean, I've known him since 1964, and he's never changed. He's always been as decent as his day is long, and he's fun to be around too. Yeah, being able to spend some time with him and a couple of other friends. Actually, one of them, Joyce Poisson, who I met through Jim. The first time I met her, I thought she might be his daughter. And then later, when Joyce got married to a gentleman named Woody Perkins, they both become dear friends. Woody is half my size. We look nothing alike. and yet our life paths have crossed in about 15 different ways. It's almost uncanny. I call him my brother from another mother because it's just uncanny. Joyce was busy one day, and Woody and I started talking. I mean, we were acquaintances already, but we started talking. All of a sudden, we found out we had done so many things at different times. But he's younger than I am, but had shared so many experiences that it was just it was very nice. Because the more you have in common with people, the closer you can feel to them and understand where they're coming from, knowing what their experience was. You can understand them better. Yeah, that part was great. Now, the museum being closed for like any kind of activities, I didn't go there once because to get to my car was hard enough. Museum is a fairly decent walk, but not where I'm at right now in terms of my walking ability. But the community center was right next door, so I got a lot of time to visit with the fans, and they had a deal inside where they put out tables and people can sell things, and the fans can come in and wander around. It's always been at the museum in years past. This time it was in the same area where they hold the wrestling matches, which is a great big room, and they had tables along the walls all the way around three quarters of both lengths and one width, the far width from the entry, all had those long tables. A lot of fans came in and bought. I even sold some pictures and things. I brought Mayhouse Singh out for the first time in his career. In pictures, I even sold a couple of them. Now the fans, I see a lot of people that are there every year, and we always say hello. And some cases, we're close enough for a hug, certainly a handshake. Yeah, it's always good to see them. And the thing is, without those fans, we couldn't do it because the wrestlers wouldn't travel all that way just to see each other. Now you can just put on Zoom, and talk to somebody,
Sure.
like sitting right there. So, yeah, my gratitude is for the fans who are willing to pay to come and be there. And you see so many of the same people. That's very heartening too. That's heartwarming. So thank you all there who might be listening to it. A few of you came up to me and said hi and mentioned our show. And now that doesn't mean that there weren't more that could have, because I wasn't available that much, like for private conversations. That was nice. One of the a gentleman named Ron Hutchison, he got the Vern Gagne Trainer Award.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he made a very nice acceptance speech too. He kept it at a moderate length, and he was appropriately grateful and humble. And when I was just getting coffee the next day, and one guy walked up and said, "Hey, I listen to your podcast." And on the other side of me, the other guy said, "Yeah, I do too." I turned around, it was Ron. And he was just as warm and friendly and nice as it's possible to be. Not that he shouldn't be. I mean, we're members in the Hall of Fame together. I mean, I guess we should be pleasant to one another. But he was nice, and thank you, Ron. And the other fan, I didn't get his name, and I'm sorry about that. But if you happen to be listening, you'll know the situation I'm talking about. And thank you too for your nice comments. I've got something to say about just about everybody that got honored. Where would you like to start?
Well, before we continue on, when you talk about some of the guys that were getting honored and whatnot, I wanted to read you something. I'm sure you said you crossed paths with Ron Hutchinson. He actually posted a picture of himself with you from the event, and he wrote a little nice blurb here online about you, and I wanted to read it to you here.
Well, thank you.
Ron Hutchinson makes a post. It's a picture of himself with Bob Roop. He says, "So I was on my way to get coffee at the hotel and had the good fortune to run into and be able to chat with this absolute legend, Mr. Bob Roop. What an honor it was for me to chat with him about everything from his podcast to the Sugar Hold. What a fascinating storyteller with an even more fascinating career. From the amateur mats to the pro ring, getting the opportunity to talk to Mr. Roop and to be able to look down from the podium and see him listening to my speech in Waterloo was certainly a big thrill for me. God bless you, sir, and thank you for sharing your treasure trove of knowledge with me.
Oh, thank you, Ron. Wow, I almost tear up at that. What a nice thing to say. Well, I told you, great guy. I mean, that's the kind of guy I said when I was saying what a wonderful guy he was.
Yes.
That I could feel that kind of sweetness, kindness in him. Yeah, he's the one being, us the old legends. We're yesterday's newspaper. This guy's brand new. He's a new star on the block. He trained some pretty serious talent.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was excellent at what he did. But well, that's so great to hear. I think that's and that praise needs to go to you too, my friend, because you and I do this podcast together. Hey, and without you, he wouldn't have been able to hear it. So I'm sharing that those accolades with you. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron Hutchinson, for those who don't know, a big-time trainer. Like you said, he broke in a lot of guys, including Edge and Christian, probably the most famous off the top of my head anyway, but tons of other talent as well throughout the years, and he certainly deserved that award in his right. So it's nice that you guys ran into each other. That's a name that I wanted to mention to you before here on the show, and so I'm glad that now you guys were able to cross paths and have some conversation there, and so very cool stuff. Ron Hutchinson receiving his award, but there was a few other awards given out, including the Frank Gotch Award, who went to Ron Simmons. And the Frank Gotch Award, and I quote, is given to a professional wrestler who brings positive recognition to pro wrestling through their work outside of the ring. It is named in honor of the professional wrestler Frank Gotch, an Iowa native who became one of the most well-known athletes in the world during the 1900s. Of course, we know Frank Gotch. You guys can do your history there on the legendary Frank Gotch. But Ron Simmons was there. He received an award. I know we've told some fun Ron stories and Ron Simmons stories in the past. And did you get a chance to say hello to Ron at all?
Yeah, I'm so sorry to say that I didn't. He wasn't around the whole time, and I wasn't that mobile either. Mm-hmm. And my apologies out there to what we promised before the Hall of Fame get together. We talked about it for months. I kept telling you about it, and I would come back and tell stories about it. Driving down there by myself was a serious mistake because it tired me out. So
I only imagine.
Yeah. So drove down Thursday. I had breakfast with my friends, Coon the Baron, on Friday, and then I went to my room and slept till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon before I got back up, and I needed to before I got back up and went out and started doing activities. That's when they had the paraphernalia thing. So I went over and I got to sit next to the Baron for the whole time doing that, which, that part is great too. Even if he's selling like a millionaire, he's selling right and left and I'm not, I don't care about that. My pleasure is his company, because true friends are hard to find and sometimes harder to stay in touch with. Now, again, my absence isn't anybody's loss, except perhaps those of you out there hoping I would come back with more stories. But I have a few that's yet to come. Now, with Ron Simmons, we had talked in the past. I'll reiterate, I was in there very early in his career. He came to the Snake Pit in Florida when I was booking there. I just got in the ring and I just happened to be walking through and I saw him and another wrestler. I think it was that Dewey Forte we had talked about.
Right. Yeah.
And they were getting trained, and it looked like the trainer needed another body to demonstrate, so he could comment while somebody. So I got in there and I just did a couple of hit the ropes. That's the one I talked about in our last program where I hit the ropes maybe 3 times. And the next day, my lat, the muscle under your shoulder, where the muscle that you run into those ropes, it felt like I'd been whacked about 3 or 4 times with a baseball bat. And I hadn't wrestled. I'd only been out of the ring for about 6 months. So it doesn't take long to get out of ring shape. That ring is dangerous if you're not in shape for it and you don't know your way around it.
Right.
So, but I got a chance to cross paths with Ron. And the other thing that I got that was meaningful to me was that Ron was an All-American football player who also played pro football for 3 different teams. So obviously he was very talented. I happened to live in Florida, and I was reading the paper all the time when he was going to Florida State. So I was able to follow his career when things came up about All-Americans, and also I got to watch him on television because Florida State would play Miami and Florida State would play Florida every year. And the game would always be on. I lived in Fort Lauderdale, so we could always see the games. And so I got to see him play, too. And then he came into pro wrestling, and he was like me. He was as humble as he could be. He wasn't saying, hey, I'm a 2-time consensus All-American football player. Mm-hmm. How about kissing my butt a little? He wasn't like that at all. He was like, I'm a brand new guy at a brand new thing. I appreciate any help I get. And I respect that attitude. I always felt that strong men should be humble. And he was like that, a very strong guy, not just in physical, because he's older now. He's not the Hulk he was. The bulk that he was. His character is I'm sure stronger even than it was. But he had a strong character even then. He thanked me just for a little bit of help I gave him. I did some research before you and I started this week's podcast, mm-hmm. and it took me 5 pages to read about all the stuff that he did. I didn't see him do any of it. I wasn't watching wrestling for 15 years or so.
Right.
I didn't get to see him, but he did so many things. And he's in the Florida State Thesz Hall of Fame. He's in not the NWA. He's in like 3 or 4 Hall of Fames besides the Tragos Hall of Fame.
Right.
So everything he's ever done, he's done at Hall of Fame level. You got to respect that. I mean, that's something that doesn't happen to just everybody. And again, he's still a humble, likable, approachable person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, my hat's off. I wish I could have said hello to him. And Ron, if you're out there, or if anybody even knows Ron, please tell him that Bob Group regrets not being able to see him. Congratulate him on a wonderful career. He had a career that's 3 times more illustrious than mine, and mine wasn't bad at all, but his was just terrific. And give him my best regards, please. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and my wife had the pleasure of meeting and hanging out with Ron for a while there in Orlando last year, and just the nicest guy in the world. In fact, you don't want to bother a wrestler. You want to come up, you want to say hello, you want to maybe share a comment and move on. But Ron actually took our ear 3 different times throughout the day and just talked away. So he's just a great guy. And so going through the names here, I see Joe Malenko was there. Did you have time to talk to Jody?
Jody and I are buddies. We're on a triple with Dr. Red Roberts and Jody. Yeah. I can't share with you what I wrote him this morning.
That's cool.
But yeah, he was there, and we got to. Yeah, he fits in with the Bear and Joyce, and I was at a table with Joyce Pastian, who has been my friend. I met her the year I got inducted, 2006. So I've known her 19 years. She got married about 10 years ago. I've known her husband since then. He's become a dear friend. And there's Severin, his daughter, who both are dear friends. And Jody was sitting in the other chair, and this was at breakfast. I was sitting with 5 people that I love, which is just such a rare thing to be able to do outside of your own family. Now, of course, you can sit down with 7 or 8 people every day, with people you love, your children, your wife. But with me, with adult, I love my boys, but of course, but we're not as close. You need to be close to your children because they need care. My boys are both adults that know their own path. But being able to sit there with those 5 at breakfast, I just looked around and I thought, you know what? Driving 1,000 miles would have been worth this because how often you be able to get. It's something you can put in your memory bank and just count on. Anytime you're feeling blue or low, you can think back to things like that. Remember how you felt being around folks that you really care about, and it improves, at least for me, it improves my mood just almost instantly. So I wanted to share that with people. It's one of the reasons I don't go down to the Hall of Fame to be, I'm almost forgotten because I'm not, I didn't have a real gimmick and my name doesn't, draw any great recognition. But to be with friends and also colleagues, wrestlers do have something in common, especially amateurs and pros. Amateur wrestlers have their own code, and pro wrestlers have their own code, and they're different. But if you've done both, they can kind of intermingle, where you can actually communicate better. You understand the other person better because you've shared more experiences. So, yeah, it was great seeing the Baron and his daughter Heidi, both wonderful people.
Very cool. Another guy, there was a picture floating around on Facebook of you guys together, you and the Baron, and in between you, and I'm not sure if this was just a quick photo op, somebody just happened to be passing through for this picture, but did you have time, or did you have any conversation with a guy by the name of Tony Garea, New Zealander? There was a picture of you, Baron, and Tony together.
Well, that's not from this year.
Oh,
okay. I saw Tony. I saw him in passing. I saw his wife's name is Mercy, and I saw her 3 or 4 times. Tony I saw twice at breakfast, and okay. the one was a Sunday breakfast. I was just getting ready to leave to go out and get in my car and take off, and we shook hands, kind of hello and goodbye, but at the same time. But again, that was because he's older too, and because of the fact the museum wasn't open, and the convention hall had this great big room. And then they had smaller rooms where you could have little short, different people put on. Eric Bischoff put on a display of some kind in one of the rooms. I don't remember what it was. Don't get me wrong, anybody out there listening. It's not that I don't value your input and that you're there and what you have to say. It's just painful for me to sit around too long. So I can't always stay for the full. If I leave sometimes, in fact, at the banquet, I left as Ron Simmons only had been started on his oration, but I needed to get out of there before it was time to go because I wanted to make sure I was wearing out. I wanted to make sure I could get back to my room before it got too crowded. But I'm hoping that they taped everything. I'm sure they did, and I'll get to watch it on tape. It's nice to be able to go to do things like that. I got to meet there's some people who really don't get. A guy named Tim Hornbaker got the Jim Melby Award, and I was doing some research, and I looked it up. He's written books about all kinds. He's written books about like baseball, the notorious Black Sox, Shoeless Joe Jackson, as well as some wrestling stuff. Very talented writer. He was sitting with Lou Thesz's, Charlie Thesz, Lou Thesz's widow, at a table outside where the main thing was going on. And I went by and I had inadvertently ignored Charlie the night before. She had come up behind me and was rubbing my shoulders. She had forgotten. I can't turn my head. I couldn't figure out who it was. So before I could ask or find out, she took off. So later I found out it was her, and I didn't even respond to what she was doing. So when I was next day later, when I'm going into the banquet hall or to the big hall for the demonstration, I see her sitting by her with this Tim Hornbaker. They're sitting at a table outside, having a nice conversation. So I walked on by, and I don't know if she was still hot, but she didn't even look at me. But I kind of snuck up behind her. I kissed her on top of the head, and I said, she looked up, I said, I still love you, don't you? And she said, oh, you. And that, that was my apology for, I said, listen, when you came up to me last night, was that you? I said, I had no idea. I said, you noticed, I'm like Lou, I can't turn my head. I'm sorry if you felt any way ignored. Oh, she said, darling, I know you'd never do anything like that. But anyway, I got to, Tim Hornbaker was sitting with her, and I got to shake hands with him, introduce myself and shake hands with him. And and congratulate him on being an honoree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not given lightly.
No, I mean, you want to talk about one of the top guys to preserve wrestling history, the term, and I hate the term now because so many people give it to themselves. If you just go online, 50% of wrestling fans are now, quote unquote, wrestling historians. And, you look around at some of these guys and it is what it is. But Tim Hornbaker can absolutely call himself a wrestling historian, somebody who really preserves the history of professional wrestling. So,
right.
He's put out some great books, absolutely. And he deserves any awards he gets in that fashion.
Well, I'm going to honor him by trying real hard to find his books. I'm hoping the library carries some of them because I found out that buying books and keeping them has turned out to be a mistake in my family. So I'll have to tell that story when we have more time. But
okay.
I'm sure I can find his book somewhere. And sorry,
sure.
Tim, if you're getting cheated because I'm reading your book from the library, you're not getting a royalty for that. I'm sorry, but at least I'm reading your work, my friend. I can, if I see you again, I can at least comment and say, hey, that book you wrote really was good. Maybe you did deserve that award.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's cool to see his name there. He definitely, was deserved of such an award. I'm honestly shocked that he didn't have it already, to be honest with you, when I think of the names of the guys that are out there doing these type of things, especially in book form. But, wow. So it sounds like, overall, other than the whole driving experience, it wasn't a bad time. You got to run in some friends and talk to some fans, and sounds like a good way to get out of the house for a few days at the very least. And I received a DM. I believe it was a DM. It might have been a post, but I know one way or the other I received a comment from one of the fans that ran into an interaction you had. May have been the one you were referencing when you were talking with Ron Hutchinson and another fan. It may have been that fan in that regards, but basically just kind of came back to me and put you over. What a good, great guy you were, how kind and humble and nice you were to him. And I wish I could pull up the note now. It's been several days. See, we were supposed to record last week, but unfortunately I lost internet for about 7 hours. And by the time it came back, we were just unable to get our schedules to work together. At least on my end, I had a whole bunch of other things going on, so I wasn't able to record with you.
Of course.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, anybody out there that doesn't think that we both want to do this every week, the thing is, I don't have much else. I do have things to do, but I don't have to do a lot. Ray has to do. He's got 8 kids and a wife. He's got a lot of things he has to do, and to make, just as a father and as a husband, such as expectations. That's your responsibilities.
Yeah.
I did all that. Not with 8. Thank God. I'm sorry. Sounds like I'm knocking you, but with 3 was pretty good. So believe me, we tried, folks. Anybody out there, we're as disappointed as anybody else when we can't put out our thoughts and our, and when I say our thoughts, they are our thoughts because I might have all kinds of stuff to say, but Ray's the one that has come up with a format basically about where we're going to go and what we're going to talk about. And that's what we agreed the way it should be. So he knows the audience far better than I do. Anyway, we both were regretful that we couldn't make it last week, but we wanted to. We were trying hard. Now, but before I'm not sure exactly where you're going. There were a couple more of the honorees I want to talk about. If you don't
absolutely.
Mind.
Please do.
I'd never even heard of Medusa. I've been out of wrestling and not watching it for so long. I might have heard the name, but when I researched her, what a fascinating person.
Mm-hmm.
She went to Japan for a tour, and I guess after the tour was over, she stayed a week or two and trained in Muay Thai and all kinds of things. And of course, I'm sure where she was working out was in the Japanese gym where the Japanese boys worked out, in the wrestling ring, and they have weights and all different kinds of things. And she impressed them enough. They offered her a 3-year contract to stay over there and be a regular over there. Boy, you talk about impressive. I mean, that's Dick Byers, the Destroyer stuff, That's very rare. So that's a real compliment to her.
Yeah, and
The other thing,
you've got to want it too. I mean, to stay in another country for that longer period of time and just put in all that effort. I mean, she was a different animal, coming back
oh
here.
yeah,
Compared to Moolah's girls. No offense to some of those girls, they wound up being some tough cookies, but Medusa was just another level. Yeah.
oh she was, and you know what, Medusa. I'm not sure what name you prefer, but I know you've got several, but we all did. But I'm going to call you what's on your picture, Medusa. I appreciate, respect your wrestling career tremendously, but the fact that little add-on job you had, like driving those monster trucks, for example, and being a champion at that, that's rather impressive too,
Yeah.
And also being, I think in one of the wrestling organizations, she was the first woman ever to win Rookie of the Year. I mean, what are you talking about? You're talking about serious talent here. And the last thing I want to say is personal. If you had asked me to guess her age, I would have been off by at least 20 years. She looks absolutely great. And she also gave the absolute most humble, germane, to the point, thank you, that could be done. Not too much, not too little. We had one that they had to get the hook. So she was.
I'll have to ask you off here.
Yeah. No, I don't. I got a story I got to tell you about.
Okay.
Another guy now, Jake Hager. That's what I'm talking about. Jake.
Yeah.
I've never met him, but two sport guy.
Yeah.
Excellent as an amateur. He set a record at Oklahoma State or Oklahoma, one of the two big schools in wrestling at the time. Mm-hmm. He penned 30 guys in one year, which was a record. I mean, to beat people is one thing, but to pen them, I mean, that's a total defeat.
That's a different animal too. Yeah.
Yeah, and to do 30 of them in 1 year. So he was All-American that year and well deserved. Well deserved. I'm proud to be in the Hall of Fame with him. I didn't have a chance to spend any time with Eric Bischoff. I don't have anything against him. I just don't know him very well. And David Crockett, I remember from the fact that, and I told him this, the Crockett brothers, Jim Jr. was a butthead. He just acted like he was superior. David was always acted like he was a middle-class guy. And I talked to him about it. And I said to him, your brother was, really a jerk. It was hard to like him, the way he acted. I said, well, how come you're different? He said, my dad made me start working early on, putting up ranks, carrying stuff, and doing all that stuff. He said, I learned the business from the ground up. David didn't have to do that. So, my brother didn't have to do that.
Right, Jim did.
So, yeah, Jim didn't. So, yeah, he was pleasant. He also gave a nice talk. And my buddy Barron got the Impact Award. He didn't say much. He does the Barron, and the Baron doesn't have long speeches.
Well, that's all the people needs to know.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. And the claw, he waves the claw goodbye. But then we had and Ron Hutchison also made a very nice speech, as well as Tim Hornbaker. But Tank Abbott got the George Tragos Award. I thought I knew him. I thought for sure I knew the guy, but we got up there and he talked. It wasn't that his speech was bad. It's just that it went real long. And, you got people sitting there. Some of them might need to get up to go to the bathroom, and they've been waiting for 15 minutes and you're still talking. They don't want to get up right in the middle of your speech. So finally, somebody in the back of the room said, somebody who worked there said something. That Tank looked up. But where I thought I knew him from, I knew a guy named Tank that worked out in California. I think it was Tank. Mm-hmm. I looked up and I saw this morning there was a guy named Tank Morgan that might have been the guy. And the story is that he was in the shower. It was Sheriff's territory. He was in the shower, and Terry Garvin and Patterson, both gay, and I've said many times in the past that has absolutely no bearing with me.
Right.
I mean, you be whatever you want. Whoever you are, that's who you are.
Yeah. I mean,
but they
you
were
hanging out with Chris Colton crazy places, so I think
yes,
we've passed that on this show
yes,
anyway. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. It's like I attached. Now Chris had a good heart, but looking at him, it's like I attached a leopard to my side. But anyway, Terry Garvin and Patterson were standing in it was a big shower, but it had like the opening in the door where you could look and see just about anybody in there. And they stood in the door. They were both clothed. And they stood in the door while this guy, Tank, was showering. And they were like smirking. And Terry said, yeah, I can see why they call a guy Tank. And yeah, Pat says, yeah, look at the cannon on the guy.
Oh,
And,
my God.
I thought, oh, my, yeah, exactly. I thought, oh, my God,
Oh.
how could you guys? Let's go back in the late 70s. You couldn't possibly get away with that now.
No.
But it turned out that it wasn't this guy because he's
No,
too
yeah.
old.
Yeah, Tank Abbott didn't. He was started off in the UFC in the mid '90s, and he worked a little bit for WCW there near the end of the years in World Championship Wrestling. But yeah, makes total sense to me, and that's a new story for the show.
Now let me add another new one.
Let's do it.
Why I think I knew Tank Abbott was this tank thing. So I kept trying to figure out. It seems like I know this guy, Tank Abbott. Where did I know this guy from? Well, it turns out years and years ago, I don't know, say somewhere in the last 25 years, because it's when we were living up here. I got a call from somebody at the Atlanta wrestling office. They wanted an interview with Dan Severin. And Dan lives in Coldwater, about 50 miles from where I live in Lansing. So rather than fly Dan into Atlanta to do just one promo and then back out, they asked me to go. They made arrangements with some kind of picture TV studio or whatever for me to go down with with Dan and take him down to the place where he could get a promo made and be like the MC, the mic holder for him, ask him a couple of questions. So I don't think I'd met Dan yet. So I went out to his, I called him and set up arrangements. I went out to his place. What an impressive! I found out. I knew from rumor, I think, that he'd been one of the guys that went down when that mixed martial arts first started down there. I believe it was in Brazil by the Gracie brothers, the Gracie family.
Yeah.
They were having these tournaments down there every year. People from all over the world would come. And if you won, we're talking, way back in the 1970s, 80s, whenever, where the main prize, if you won, you got $100,000 or something like that. It was big, big money. So, I had heard that Severin had won one of them and taken second in a couple of others. And the place he had a beautiful big place. He had a place that looked like a barn, but about half again as bigger, like a barn and a half, beautifully painted. And inside he had 4 different compartments. He had one room that was a wrestling room. It had like 6 of these Resolite mats. Those things cost about $5,000 each. He had 6 of those. He had another room. Each of these rooms are pretty good size. He had another room that had a professional ring in it. He had another room that was a weight room. And he had the other room, I can't remember what it was. It was kind of open. But he had a trophy shelf. Now, I never went over to it. But he had a trophy shelf that went the length of one whole room. I'd say it had to be at least 10 yards, 30 feet long.
Wow.
And every inch of it was covered with trophies. I don't mean facing out. It's like he put them on there and just had to keep making room, like toys under a Christmas tree or something,
Add an extension to the building, man.
Yeah. If I put my ledge up there for my trophies, it'd be about a foot long. So, I was pretty impressed. Well, Severin was an impressive guy. And at that time, the mixed martial arts were, you could use, not just wrestling, but, you could use kickboxing and striking and, all that. I mean, you couldn't gouge eyes, you couldn't kick and, you couldn't kick below the belt and all that kind of thing. But it was pretty wide open. And a big part of it was submission. Well, what happened was Dan, after we got to know each other a little, I think it was before we went to tape, he wanted to show me something on his television set. I might have asked him about the mixed martial arts fighting. He says, "Yeah, let me show you a match." And he showed me this match.
Yeah, the Severn Tank Abbott match. Is that what you're getting to?
Yes.
Yeah, wow.
Yes.
You talk about beating up a tree. I mean, Dan wins that one by unanimous decision, and rightfully so, because he owns Tank during the match as far as striking and everything goes. But my God, you might as well have been, like I said, been working over a tree, because Tank just takes it, man. He just takes it.
He elbowed him in the back of the head at least 100 times.
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember I was counting them.
Yeah.
After 50, I started counting. I thought, and he kept smacking sometimes with open hands.
Yeah,
but,
Dan learned that the hard way. You know, if you go back and watch the very early UFCs, Dan mounts a guy from behind and starts swinging punches into the guy's head, and he breaks most of his knuckles doing that in the process.
There you go.
So Dan learned to do open hand palm strikes after that, right? Yeah.
Oh, there we go. That explains it. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
You know, and when Dan showed me this fight at his house, he had him down. It's an 18-minute time period, no rounds, one 18-minute time period.
Wow.
And there's 3 judges. And if nobody gives up or quits, I think it was submission.
Or knockout. Yeah.
Or knockout, yeah. He had him down, totally controlled him for like 17 and a half minutes. And the one thing that was known about, they had shown, previewing the match, they had shown this Tank Abbott in action when people stood toe-to-toe with him.
Yeah.
He was a monster.
Yeah.
He was blasting people and like knocking them off their feet.
Yeah, he came in. I thought nobody knew who he was when he came in, but they remembered him really quick. Yeah.
Well, with Severn's fight, Dan had him for 17 and a half minutes. Tank could not do anything. I think he tried the thing called a reverse headbutt. Like he would try from the bottom, he would try to butt Severn in the face, maybe hit him in the nose or something. That was the extent of his offense for the whole match. And then for some reason, with 30 seconds to go, Severn, I don't say he let him up, but God, to me, it looked like he did. And I thought, why? Well, maybe there was only 20 seconds to go. I thought, why would you let this guy back on his feet when all he needs is one lucky punch? And you owned him for 17 and a half minutes, and you lose? But Dan was able to dance, and Tank went after him. He went after him big time. But Dan did a little dancing, and the 18 minutes ended. Yeah, that's how I remembered
Tank Abbott. Yeah, that's a hell of a fight to remember him from too. I mean, I remember watching that, and just marveling at it. Now that was during a period where I think they were still trying to outlaw UFC and a lot of pay-per-views. You couldn't even order the pay-per-views, so I would have to wait to rent the tapes when they came out. But we grabbed that tape as soon as it was out there at the video store, and we were just like, holy, because we were excited. You know, what a fight, because Tank was more of that prize fighter kind of guy, you know, like he came in just to make the money, and Dan Severn was the beast, literally the beast, and, the national champion and whatnot. Even took out Buzz Sawyer in the semis there, and back in '76 in the nationals. But man, yeah, that's a hell of a fight. I got to go back and watch that now. You got me thinking about that. It's been years.
And that's when I finally remembered. Oh, that's where I remember him from. Yeah. And then I was thinking, I went and looked at his record. Now he was a brawler. He made his name of being a real street fighter,
pit fighter.
Yeah. I mean, he's shy. He was a shooter. He liked to fight. But his MMA record was 10 wins and 15 losses, and he knocked out 7 people. But he also got knocked out 8 times. So I don't know how successful a career I consider that. I mean, I give him credit for having the guts, the gumption, or whatever to do it, because it's dangerous as hell. You can get your neck broken, but not with people not trying to do it. Right. You know, it just catch you the wrong way. Your head's turned the wrong way, and you get hit in the side of your head with a kick. They've had some of those fights on MMA where it's a total surprise. The match just gets started. One guy makes mistakes. He's a big stud. He's a big favorite. I remember one that lasted about 5 seconds. He got a head kick down. He won. He was out. You know, he was supposed to win the fight.
Right.
that's what finally came to me. That's where I remembered the name Tank Abbott from, and I thought it was nice to be able to, to personalize the story and bring, like even a Dan Severn. We're talking about a great, absolutely great shooter, amateur wrestler, and real, street fight type guy, but also it organized mixed martial arts, one of the top in the world in his prime. I took since he lived so close, I might have said this before, but when my son was interested after he graduated from high school,
right,
he was interested in mixed martial arts. So I took him to Dan's school and paid Dan to train him. He trained down there for a couple of years. I didn't see much of him over the years, but, we're not close. And rightfully so. I'm an Olympian, but, and he's not, but he's everything else that I'm not.
Yeah. He had quite the career. Yeah.
Yeah.
You think about, winning the Nationals in 1976 and then 20 years later, almost 20 years later, becoming the Ultimate Fight champion. You do the math there on his age. At that age, by that point, you shouldn't be winning competitions like that anymore, right? I mean, that's old for a pro or whatever you want to call that. And Dan was getting it done, man. He's just a different kind of animal. So he earned the name. Some of these guys are aptly named, right? Dan the Beast Severn, absolutely. Tank Abbott, yeah, that's a tank when you just beat on it with elbows for 18 minutes, and the guy just gets up and keeps coming. It's like a machine, literally, like a machine.
Tank looked like the Beast.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at him before the match, Tank looks like the Beast, snarling and slobbering, looking like a rabbit ready to come over and bite you.
Yeah.
And Dan looked calm, cool, and collected.
Dan's so quiet, the way he talks and the way he presents himself outside of the octagon or outside of the ring or whatever you want to call it. Dan's such a different human when he's just speaking. He's got a podcast now, and he's actually learned to pick up some sort of charisma and charm over time as well as he's with his age. So it's
he's smart.
Yeah, he's a really
smart
really
man.
Intelligent business guy on top of everything he accomplished physically. So that's that's good stuff. I'm glad you told that story, man. You brought back some great memories of the UFC, the old school UFC. And oh my God, just waiting for those tapes. And we would go. My brother would hang out. We would go rent 10 of them at the same time, watch them back to all night, make an all-nighter out of it, and couple decades ago, or even longer than that. But yeah, good stuff, good times back in the old days.
Isn't it funny that they were thinking about trying to outlaw it, and now it's number one TV watching in this country.
Gosh. All the gambling and everything they're making out of that now.
Oh yeah. It's just, it's funny. Australia was always about 10 years in fashion style. In terms of clothes and shoes and things, Australia was always about 10 years behind the United States. Like what you would see them wearing, for example, you remember the 6-inch shoes, the shoes that had like the 6-inch height,
the platform
things on them, platform shoes, yeah. Before platform shoes had been in style in the United States for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And I didn't see one. When I went to Australia, I didn't see one pair of them. And then I went back a few years later, and everybody was wearing them. So that's what I mean when I say they're like 10 years behind the time, the United States. But anyway, I don't know why I even got up on that ramble. But seeing Tank, the person who applied the hook, to get him off there, they got a woman at the back of the room to say something. She yelled out something. I wasn't cut or whatever, or seen over. I don't know what it was, but it got his attention, and he wound up shortly after that. So, I mean, it's speechless.
So it was like Showtime at the Apollo, bring out Mr. Sandman, get the hook, and take him off the stage.
Yeah.
Sweep him off the stage.
Well, yeah, it wasn't boring or anything. I mean, I got to calculate the odds of ever running into this guy in person. He wasn't boring or anything, but he did have a tendency to wander. He was kind of like me, as a matter of fact. He had a tendency to ramble a little bit, and that wasn't what the people there were waiting to hear. They wanted to hear, thank you, appreciate the honor, drinks around me at the bar, good night. That's what they wanted to hear. Anyway, yeah, that was an interesting little aside. I knew there had to be a tank somewhere because I that story with Garvin and Terry Garvin and Pat Patterson. I mean, I didn't dream it up. So there was a tank involved, so tank somebody.
Right.
So I looked, and Tank Morgan was born in 1966. Not 66, 66.
56.
Yeah, 56.
Yeah.
Would have made him about 21, which was right. And he was a big, thick guy too. So this Tank Abbott didn't look like him at all.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
Well, I just want to say, if by any chance Eric Bischoff or any of his friends and associates are listening to this, I mean nothing by the fact that I'm not talking about him. I just don't know him.
Yeah.
And I don't know much to say about him. I think that he obviously did well. He's renowned for creating Nitro, I think it was, and a 2 hour show, and that was innovative at the time. I was completely out of the business, so I had no appreciation for it. A couple months ago, I was telling you, we were talking about Kevin Sullivan again.
Mm-hmm.
And I had looked up some stuff since earlier talking about him and realized how established a career he had. And we talked about it.
Yeah.
All the things he's done, I had no clue. If I had to find out anything new about Eric Bischoff, that I can say that, in a way to, praise him or, make his, have some appeal towards that he might like or that his fans might like, then I'll surely say that then. I just don't have them right now.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. Eric, you guys kind of cross paths just at, the end. You're leaving, and several months later, Dusty hires Eric in there to work as the D announcer, like he's underneath Jim Ross, underneath Tony Schiavone, but Eric comes in and kind of gets to do the smaller TV programs, a lot of the interviews, the control center type segments and things like that, and works his way up and somehow walks his way into running the company there for a few years when it was at its most successful time frame. So yeah, Eric's very well remembered in the wrestling business. He goes on to become an on-air personality, a heel character, both in WCW and later on in WWE. So Eric's been around quite a while, and I'm sure most people have heard of Eric Bischoff, and they know stories. And he starts off up there working for Vern. So he's had a long history career around the wrestling business.
Those guys just can't resist it. McMahon couldn't resist it. Now, Vinny Jr. did bulk up. He was under that suit. He was humongous. But they can't resist that. No matter how famous they are.
Yeah.
He could be Bischoff could be out at the swankiest restaurant in town with Sting having dinner, and 10 people might come up asking for an autograph, and all of them are going to ask Sting,
sure.
And nobody's going to ask him. So yeah, they always want to be. Wait a minute,
I could do this too. I could be a character too.
Right.
Let me just figure out a way to get. And of course, Vince owning his company, Vince, that was a huge success. He gambled on that, and I don't even know if Vince wanted to take it to the level he did until he saw what it was generating. Him and the Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon feud was just one of the most legendary feuds in wrestling history, honestly. And Vince played the character well. I'm sure a lot of that was actually Vince. I mean, dialed up a little bit, yes, but at the end of the day, it seems like it would be Vince. But yeah, and Eric kind of was the same way. I just had this conversation with my one son who goes back and watches the old stuff. He felt that, Eric's stuff in WWE was better than his stuff in WCW. But I said there's a lot of things that go in with that, because Eric had nothing to lose in WWE because he was just an on-air character. That's what he was hired for. In WCW, right. He was also trying to run the company and play this character that he had never done before, and so it was a little different. But yeah, he had his time, definitely. He had his time on air.
Well, running the company for WCW, unless it changed after I was through, after Ole got let go, mm-hmm. They had executives in there.
Yeah. Eric always blamed the executives for lots of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they all had a job. Some of them were making $300,000 or $400,000 a year. They all had a job in a big office, and they had to do something. I mean, I think I told a story about Jim Barnett. Did I tell you a story about Jim Barnett?
We told a lot of stories about Jim Barnett.
Yeah. Well, one of them was he was a consultant. Barnett scheduled a meeting. He was a consultant. That was his job, consultant. He scheduled a meeting to be held in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or maybe it was Mobile. It doesn't matter. It was like hundreds of miles from Atlanta. So a lot of the wrestlers that were coming from the Carolinas, so they were coming even further than the people who were living around Atlanta. He flew everybody out to this location, several hundred, again, 500 miles away. So he's got 30 guys there, had to pay the airfare and all that. He got up there and gave a little 5-minute speech about, I want everybody to work hard and to do their job, and this has been a good meeting. Goodbye. That's what he did. And I asked Louise Manning, who ran the office and all that, I said, how much did your tickets cost for all that? She said, oh, multiple thousands of dollars. He could have had that meeting in Atlanta, and nobody would have had to fly anywhere. Everybody could have driven, but by holding it out there, flying everybody, made it look important. The consultant's doing something. He's doing some consulting,
Right?
and he's getting these people out here way out the neck of the woods to do the consulting because it's really important to be out there for some effing reason. I never did understand that, but it happened. I happened to be there. I saw it happen. I couldn't believe it. I thought, that's it? That's why you fool us all out here? Was to say, hey, boys, how's everybody? Okay, meeting over. Oh, my God. He had to do something to justify his paycheck. And so he made up an event. And
I tell you what, and he was snuck in under the radar, and he stayed under contract, I believe, with WCW until WWF, until it went out of business, and the WWF purchased it in 2001.
Oh yeah,
and then he became a consultant for the WWF. And I'm not saying he did anything, but he was there, and actually he was the guy. They say he was the man that pointed to John Cena and said that's the next guy. And so Jim Barnett, had his hand in the business from, my God, you go back to the inception of TV wrestling all the way to John Cena. Think about that, though.
Wow. And think about this. Think about a guy who's got to weigh, maybe 130 pounds. Mm-hmm. He's slender. He's not fat or, he's not porky or anything. He's 5'9" or so, wears glasses. He's got well-dressed. He's got jewelry, nice ring, nice watch on, all that. Very smartly turned out, nice, expensive clothes, probably a $200 tie or whatever. But he's a queen. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a knock. He can't help but behave in a feminine manner.
Yeah.
And, he's feminine with his mannerisms. Mm-hmm. And imagine him getting in front of like 50 wrestlers. Whether they're gay, straight, or anything else, they're all big muscle, strong guys. And here's this guy that any guy in the room could beat half to death with both feet tied together and one hand tied behind his back. And he's in charge and telling everybody what to do. Think about what a charge he must have gotten out of that and what kind of stature he got among his friends and associates.
Well, we've talked so much about Jim and what what he did back in the Georgia. We spent a lot of time talking about Jim with Ole as well, and he just seemed to slip through the cracks no matter what. He always seemed to have a job. Vince McMahon picks him up there in the mid '80s, and he stays on. Obviously, we know the story there. We talked about that, and signing over basically the TBS show to Vince McMahon there. Jim Barnett played a big part in that and stays on with Vince till '87. Eventually winds back up over on the other side working for the Turner brand. Like you said, as an advisor or whatever, that consultant, if you will. And we'll see his name pop up on some of the credits from time to time in WCW. It's like, Jim Barnett's there? What's going on? But yeah, he would be there until the end of time and then go over to work for the WWF for a little bit after that. And then obviously Jim has since passed away back in 2004, if I remember correctly. So, but he spent basically his entire adult life working for the wrestling business in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in retrospect, I wouldn't want to trade lives with him, but I've got to respect what he accomplished under the circumstances of who and how he was. The fact that, one of the things might be that he had a good mind. He was a smart man. He was cunning and sly, and he could be nasty as it's possible to be. And when we talked about in our earlier segments, about what kind of revenge he was planning for Ole and anybody else who crossed him. And he certainly got revenge on Ole. Think about it. It cost him his company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he was a very smart guy. And can I say I admire him? I respect what he made of it, what he did with what he was dealt.
That is a book, that's a book at the end of the day. I actually just had a listener, Rick Fields, who I'm working on a research with, doing a projects over on our territory show, Regional Wrestling, with him right now. We're getting ready to discuss the Georgia War of the 1970s with Ann Gunkel and the NWA. But he was telling me, boy, wouldn't it be something if Jim Barnett was still around and could do an autobiography on Jim Barnett? I said, well, I don't know how much of it would be truth, I'm sure Jim would elaborate quite a bit, but at the same time, I mean, if somebody really did the digging, what an amazing story. I don't know that there would be a better book, really. I mean, just you couldn't even believe some of the things that in the book and everything that he played a hand in. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was here for this and he was here for that. He was here for everything. They called upon him when there was the Georgia War. Jim, we need help. Come back from Australia, and here he was, and obviously so. Man, yeah, just definitely, I don't want to say a polarizing figure, but certainly one of the biggest figures in all of wrestling history. He has to be. Nearly, 6, 70,
right,
about 60 years in the business? I mean, that's a lot of time you put in.
One of the things we talked about before was him giving contributions to politicians.
Yeah.
That might have been his secret to, partially a big part of his success was that if he had certain, say, congressman or senator or two who somehow he had their card or some kind of thing from them that showed that he was their friend, or he had a special, he had a position in the government having something to do with being a deputy curator of the arts or something. Mm-hmm. But even having that card, then he could go up in, like in Australia, he could go and schedule an appointment with the president of a TV studio, and say it's Mr. James Barnett, envoy from the Department of Arts in the United States, and local television promoter would like to have a meeting. Who's going to turn him down? And then once he's there, even if you are bemused by his behavior being so effeminate, he was witty and he was appropriate. He knew how to talk to people, and he could read situations and deal with just about anything.
Well, he knew how to read a room and work anybody, right? And it's the old proverb of fake it till you make it, so to speak. So even when Jim wasn't, the biggest name in the room, he kind of made you feel like he was. Like, this guy must be somebody important. So we'll take him for his word. We'll give you that TV station. Yeah, we'll do this. Yes, we'll do that.
Yeah,
sure, we'll give you. We'll sponsor this. So Jim was good at what he did, and that's why he was so successful for so many decades, and to the point where I'd have to imagine some of these promoters didn't even care for him, but were like, well, it's Jim Barnett. We have to work with him. And so that was just...
I wish he was still alive. I would try to get the Tragos Thesz Hall of Fame, not to induct him, but to invite him as a guest speaker about his career.
Well, if he were still alive, he would be 101 years old. So I don't know if he would have made that trip anyway. But
that's true. Well,
I know what you mean, though. Speaking of, unfortunately, speaking of deaths, I did want to touch on this on the episode this week, Bob, because it's timely for the moment, and that is last week was the passing of one of, I would say, in my lifetime, probably the biggest name in wrestling history, and that would be Hulk Hogan, who was 71 years old, and we had seen some health issues in recent weeks, months, posted on the internet. It wasn't anything major, some back surgeries, things like that. Nothing that led you to believe that, Hulkster would be passing away, in the days to come. And so we started seeing a little bit of rumors trickle down that he's not doing too well. And some of his friends like Jimmy Hart were refuting that, saying, no, Hulkster's fine, last I heard. And then the next thing you know, there's just reports popping out in the late morning last week that one of the days Hulk Hogan passed away. And I kind of waited around. I saw it posted on a few places, even reputable places. I don't mean wrestling sites. I mean actual news sites. But I'm like, this just kind of feels like I'm going to wait until it's a little more confirmed, right? And so as I see it, the news, CNN's reporting it and Fox News is reporting. I said, okay, I guess it's true. But it's so weird. It's just, I know it sounds silly. You don't expect someone like that to pass away, at least not that young. Like Hulkamania was the anchor of the entire 80s. They call it the Hulkamania era in the WWF, basically. And I mean, he changed wrestling. I saw somebody post online, I think it was Brian Solomon posted, he said, there was wrestling before Hulk Hogan, and then there was wrestling after Hulk Hogan. He basically changed the game, so it's amazing to see all of, a lot of people are focused on some of the stuff that he's been in trouble with over the last 15 years or so. And that's what people want to focus on. And other people are focusing on, what he did, not just for the wrestling business, but what he did, for the longest time. I think until John Cena, Hogan had seen more sick children than anybody else on the planet. He granted more Make-A-Wish, type deals than anybody. And so he did a lot of good for a lot of people. Yes. And he did a lot of good for a lot of people. But at the same time, obviously some of that's overshadowed and clouded by a lot of the things he's done and said in recent years.
I didn't know at all about the Make-A-Wish stuff.
Yeah.
I wish I had. I mean, I never looked down at anything at Terry. I didn't have any relationship with him at all, really, because I knew him before he became Hulk Hogan, and once he became Hulk Hogan, he wouldn't speak to me. So I never had any reason to go try to speak. If a guy won't speak to me one time when I approach him, I usually don't approach him again. I figure if they need to talk to me for some reason, they can come and ask me or talk to me. Mm-hmm. But I don't want anybody to pass away before their time. And 71 to me is young, but maybe his family, his genetic makeup in his family might be that's the typical age that the males die. But the other thing, there is an ingredient, and this is going to sound like a knock, but it's just a fact. When Terry Gibbs, who was a friend of Terry Bollea of Hulk hadn't become Hulk yet, but he was a friend. Terry Gibbs was working for me, and he took a week off to go home to Tampa. I was working in Knoxville. Yeah. And he called me from Knoxville, and he said, "Hey, Bob, you got a guy here, him, Terry Bollea." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, he's took." He said, "I just saw him." He said, "He took a year off. He's been working out." He said, "He's humongous. You won't believe how big he is." I said, "Well, he wasn't. I don't care how big. There've been a lot of big muscular guys that showed up, they couldn't get in the ring without falling down." So that is in itself. But the thing is, I didn't have any room for him. If I was going to hire him, I would have had to fire somebody else and there was nobody that needed firing. Everybody we were drawing money. The matches were good. There was no reason to change anything. So I tried to get him booked in Pensacola with Louis Tillett. And I told Terry Gibbs, I should have called Terry Bollea myself, but I told Terry, I was busy. I was booking. I told Terry Gibbs, I said, have him. I called Louis Tillett. That's it. I called Louis. Louis said, yeah, have him call me. So I passed that on. I did what I could for him. Well, again, 3 years later, he goes, I think he'd been in Minnesota or someplace. He'd become a big star. And when I approached him in a nightclub to say hi, he wouldn't even talk to me. Now, let's go back to that year they took off. How do you think he got so big in that year?
Well, probably the same way Superstar Graham got big. But a lot of working out too, though. Don't get me wrong.
A lot of working out, yeah.
A lot of steak eating, and maybe some vitamins, brother.
But see, maybe some chemicals. The vitamin. That's it. Let's call them vitamins.
That's it, brother.
Super vitamins. Those ones that were, for some reason they were so super they were illegal. In order for him to get that big, that quick, he had to be doing something. He had to. I know what it was. The main driving force of a lot of steroids is that it drives you to work out. It's not that it's just adding, like if you just sat around and didn't do any working out, your muscles will all get bigger. You have to work out. But that's what, at least the Road Warriors, what Hawk explained to me was, the Dynaball and this other stuff. You just got to work out, and then you got to eat. Then you got to work out again. Then you got to eat again. And it drives you. I remember taking 2 doses of something, and I didn't like within 10 minutes, I didn't like the feeling I got. So I never thought about it again.
Okay.
I thought I'll just stay flabby or whatever I am. But if you're going to dance, you got to pay. You got to pay the fiddler. I always say the piper, but I don't know who that is. I guess it's a guy blowing a pipe. But our Hawk died at 43, Animal at 60. In spite of both being, I don't know about Hawk. He might have blown his money, but I know Animal saved his money. He was a multimillionaire, and so he had available to, the best hospitals in the world. and he couldn't save whatever took him at age 60. I'm 83. I consider 60 young. Oh, I look back now when I was 60, man, I was a young stud, you know. Well, maybe not a stud, but however, that said, for all the knowing that he was kind enough to spend his spare time for sick kids, it actually changes my opinion about him quite a bit. I didn't know he had that altruistic impulse in him. So I'm glad to know more. I'm glad to know that. I don't like to think. I don't think bad about people. I just don't think about them. But I'm glad to be able to think of him and think about him in a positive manner. You know, the price of fame can be very, very high. With him, the TV show he had and the thing that happened within his own family while that TV show was airing had to be more embarrassing than, I don't know, being photographed with your pants down or you know, in a nunnery or something. You know, he got through it, and he stayed famous. He always made money. I remember one time going into a hardware store. I don't remember what I was even looking for, but I got in one section of it, and there were 5 or 6 things. I remember a lunchbox was one of them. There were 5 or 6 things that Hulk Hogan had his picture on. In this one store, in one section of this hardware store. Yeah. There were 5 or 6 things that had his picture on it.
I'd have to imagine at one point, if they made it, his likeness was on it somewhere.
Yeah. And he was getting residuals for all that.
Yeah.
But again, the life of a wrestler is that of I don't want to say a slave, but it's that of a chattel in a way that you have a duty that you can't avoid. And he was always, I read this in his own words. He wrote them. He was always afraid, even when he was hurt. He had a bad knee for a long time. He said even when he was hurt, he didn't want to take off because he was worried that if he was off, he knew how quickly he got made, you know, into something. He saw how quickly they could bring in a Roddy Piper and make somebody like him.
Yeah.
So he didn't want to take any extended time off, like a month or 2 months. But he was afraid that somebody would come in and be made that would make him, relegate him down to second or third place. That's what he said in his own words. So he never would take time off. And man, oh man, I don't care if you got $1 billion in your bank account. You can't sleep at night because your knee's throbbing, or, you know, you can't barely walk. I don't know if it's worth it. But anyway, we are talking about him, aren't we? He'll be famous forever. Gorgeous George, Buddy Rogers, Hulk Hogan. You know, probably more than Lou Thesz, only because of the fact of the style. He was the big show style. Lou was the grab a hold, you know, the kind of a different style. I mean, Lou, don't get me wrong, Lou Thesz was very, very, very respectable and worthy of respect. He was a man's man and all that. In the Hulk's era of the business, a Lou Thesz match would be boring because of the way that the matches were being run. Think about WrestleMania having a Lou Thesz match, and there where Lou goes out there and grabs a hold for, 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it would have worked. I never watched one. So I don't know. But a lot of the matches it seemed to be like action was the theme. Let's keep the show rolling and the action, keep it action, keep the audience excited. We don't want this audience to settle down too much.
Well,
again,
I think, in Lou, it's different eras too. So Hogan comes with the national expansion cable, everything, the big boom happens all at the same time. So it really helps. But I think at the end of the day too, Hulk Hogan's more of a character. Lou Thesz was a wrestler. I think you had to have watched or been interested in pro wrestling to know the name Lou Thesz. Whereas Hulk Hogan, everybody knew what Hulk Hogan was. He was that wrestler guy
That's true.
That appeared in TV shows, made movies. I mean, my grandparents didn't watch wrestling, and they were fine with me watching it. But I think at one point they became a little disturbed as how much I watched it. But at the same time, they knew who Hulk Hogan was. They certainly could identify him. My grandfather called him Old Hulky. There's Old Hulky. on the screen. So, I mean, it was just a guy everybody knew, right? I mean, he transcended pro wrestling. He made it mainstream, right? And people talk about today in the new, now I feel old talking about the new generation, these young kids out there, but they argue online, oh, what a household name is. Oh, John Cena was a household name, or Roman Reigns is a household name. And I hate to hurt their feelings, but none of those guys are a household name. I can walk down the street right now and mention maybe John Cena because he's done some movies and he's done some other things now. Maybe that name might be recognized by more people. However, Hulk Hogan was indeed a household name. Whether you watched wrestling or not, you knew what Hulk Hogan was. He was on everything, like you said.
Yeah, even kids.
He had a cartoon.
Even kids who never been there, even watched wrestling on TV might have heard the name Hulk Hogan. I know that when I taught, my teaching career was always elementary school. The highest I would go would be 7th and 8th grade, middle school. I tried high school a few times. Usually I had to kick about half the class out because every time they saw a substitute, they thought they could just do what they wanted. So
sure.
I'd have to send them to detention or take them out in the hall and talk to them. And I mean that, just talk to them. You never threaten anybody unless you want to go to jail. So, but yeah, saying, I remember starting with some classes that looked like they were going to be difficult. I started out by saying, I don't know if any of you are wrestling fans out here, but at the time, The Rock was a big name.
Yeah.
I said, but, I used to be a wrestler. You know what? One time I made The Rock cry. I had The Rock actually crying. And, and the wrestling fans, not everybody in the room, a lot of the girls weren't, but the guys would be talking to each other. What, huh? I said, yeah. I said, during intermissions, when you get a break, go to the computer in the back and Google my name. And so I said, now, here's the deal. If you behave yourself all day, at the end of the day, I'll tell you how I made The Rock cry. But if you don't, then I'm sorry, I won't be able to tell you the story. I'm telling you, that stuff worked. And you know how I made The Rock cry?
By beating up his daddy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I beat up his dad, and we did there was some blood involved, and they carried him out on a stretcher, and I was leaving. I got fans were hot as hell. It's Orlando. I managed to get through the curtains, and I was in a dark area in the back. Curtains before the curtains into the hallway were already closed. So when the ones behind me closed, it was kind of dark. And I felt something hit me in the ankle, and it hurt like hell. I stopped. I looked out, and there's this little kid there. He's got on cowboy boots with a steel toe on them, and he had just kicked me in the ankle. He said, "You hurt my daddy." It was The Rock. He was 3 years old. So yeah, I used to have fun doing that. It was a help in class. Let's contrast some things. Let's contrast Hulk and The Rock. Rock has taken everything that Hulk got and has transformed it into a mega. He would never have to wrestle again.
Right.
He would never have to do anything again. But he transformed it into, in a way that gave him freedom. He had choice. He still wrestles, but only when he wants to. He found something else that he could do. And I consider that really intelligent, to do that. Hulk tried a movie or two, but as far as I remember, I never went to that.
They never made much at the box office.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I think The Rock's worth estimated something like $800 million today.
Well, he's earned it. I mean, the guy's a smart guy. Same with Magic Johnson. He's done really great for himself. You got to give him credit. The smart guys some people get their money. There's guys that made as much money as those guys did for a while that blew it all. And then maybe something happened to them. They got hurt or whatever, where they couldn't work anymore, or they weren't able to become, stars anymore. Mm-hmm. And we started with Hulk. And, rest in peace, Terry. I knew you before you ever got started. And, I always, I never wished you ill. I never said, oh, he didn't speak to me. I hate his guts. You were good for wrestling. You drew a lot of attention. People who were watching TV, watching you on TV, would also look for other wrestling shows to watch, including ones that you weren't on. So he was a big help to pro wrestling. And that helped me, and, it helped my colleagues, it helped my friends. He made a lot of money for everybody, not just Vince McMahon and himself.
The boys used to say they loved being on the card with Hulk Hogan because they knew they were going to make a whole lot more money on a card with him than working the B show or whatever. So yeah,
right. So yeah, and I'm grateful to him for that. And the thing about giving his time was precious. For him to give his time to sick kids, my estimation of him went up by about 50%. As a person.
It's funny too, Bret Hart, who is, doesn't have the nicest things to say about most people, and Hulk Hogan's one of them, and rightfully so based on some of their history. But at the same time, Bret put Hogan over. This is way before Hogan passed away. Bret put Hogan over once. He said something along the lines of, they were in the airport and Hulk Hogan wouldn't turn down an autograph. He signed dozens and maybe 100 autographs. Everybody that came near him, he didn't turn one down. Meanwhile, he's getting later and later for his flight. And finally, they say, we're going to close the gate. You got to get on the plane because he's sitting there signing the autographs. Finally, one last person runs up to him as he's boarding the plane, begging for the autograph. And Hulk says, I'm sorry, I'm going to miss my flight. I can't. And Bret said he heard this guy mumble something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but something like, just as I always figured, just another asshole celebrity. And Bret said if that guy only knew how many autographs he did sign versus the one that he didn't because he was going to miss his flight. So it just kind of shows you, like, Hogan, he took that character that was given to him. Vince McMahon gave that and said, you go ahead and do what you're going to do with it. But you got to, you're the good guy. You're the babyface. You're not allowed to turn down autographs. You're not allowed to do this and do that.
Right.
And Hogan embraced that. He says, yeah, okay, that's absolutely fine. And he did everything he could to make it work and to get that character over. And just listen to that story Bret Hart tells where he's signing up. Think about that, on top of it, because you're not just a wrestler walking through the airport. You're Hulk Hogan walking through the airport. So you're going to get 20 times as many fans coming to you to sign this and take a picture with this person. And he never turned any of that down, at least not during his peak years. So
right.
It shows you, imagine what he went through on the daily, and there, you can't even imagine sleeping with all of the personal appearances he had to make on the radio, on TV, like you're talking about going from town to town, doing commercials, doing television spots. I mean, just a lot goes into making that work, getting that over to that level. It goes far beyond coming out and cupping your ear and dropping the big leg, brother. So it's, it's telling to see somebody who had that much success, unfortunately. And like I said, in more recent years, a lot of clouds over the Hulkster due to, some of the comments that he's made and in other situations and what. I'm not going to get into any of that here because it's not really the point in time. A lot of people wanting to dwell on that versus anything else. And I'm not going to sit here and put him over. I got to be honest with you. As a kid, I never bought into it. I was not a Hulkamaniac. Most kids were. 95%, 98% of kids were. I kind of latched on to some of the other guys, and I wasn't really a big Hulk Hogan guy, but I can't denounce what he did for the business or what he meant to the business as I was growing up. I can't imagine watching the WWF in that era without Hulk Hogan. So it would have been a completely different world. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, his work was ordinary. Yeah. I mean, his work in the ring was ordinary, but the idea is that usually it was a packed house. So, and he didn't have to do much. We talked about it with Dusty. The packed house, Dusty doesn't have to go out there and go 45 minutes. He can go out there and go 7 or 8 minutes and, do his his blood and guts and do a finish. Same with Hulk. He didn't have to go. In fact, you can overexpose a star. You don't want to do that. You don't want him to say, you don't want Andre out there for an hour. He starts to look mortal, instead of like a beyond belief character. And the same with Hulkamania. If he'd been out there, say he tried to work a match, the high spot match with arm drags and all that, he would have exposed the fact that he's not a wrestler in about 5 minutes. And so the fact that he did work the way he did, that was appropriate.
Well,
And
people
the
say
fact
Hulk Hogan didn't know how to work. Well, what are you using in the term work? I'm not saying he's Lou Thesz or anything out here, but apparently it was successful enough to draw in, a lot of the fans. And for anybody who thinks Hulk Hogan didn't know how to work at all, I mean, think about where he was trained. He came out of Florida down there in the Snake Pit. He got some work down there. And on top of that, and anybody who really hasn't studied Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, prepare to have your minds blown. Go out there and Google anything Hulk Hogan did in New Japan. And holy shit, it's night and day compared to what he didn't have to do that in the WWF though, which is why he didn't. And again, I'm not saying you're going to see Lou Thesz levels of wrestling, but I mean, to go from a headlock into a hammerlock into a drop toe hold in a fluid sequence, you wouldn't expect Hogan to do that, but there he is doing that over in Japan. He was
Where
better
can I
than
see that?
Anywhere you want to look up some New Japan Hulk Hogan footage, tons of it. Inoki, Stan Hansen, all sorts of good stuff. There. In fact, I just called one recently against Tenryu. Yes, good stuff. I'll send you a few links. I'd love to see that.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for ways to admire people. I'm so glad to hear about him being kind-hearted. I thought he was a jerk. I thought he was so self-involved with his fame, and I thought he needed to be famous. I thought he craved it. That, to me, a lack of privacy is the worst thing you could do to me. If I had a choice of being in a solitary prison cell by myself or in an open area surrounded by 50,000 people, but I can't leave and they can all watch me, I'll take the cell. At least I got privacy.
I've never been on both. You've been on both sides of the fence, so you can you have a better idea than I do of what it's like on the other side. The grass is always greener, as they say. I've never experienced that whole fame deal as you did, working in the territory system and things like that in Florida and places of that nature. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from in regards to, I'd rather have my freedom. I'd rather have my privacy, et cetera, et cetera. What do you want to give up for the price of fame? That's why it's, a term, the price of fame.
Yeah. When you say, all my little hucksters out there, I love you and I love everybody. You're basically saying, look, I love you. Feel free to come up to me if you see me in public.
Yeah.
You're not saying it, but you're implying it. Feel free to look how friendly I'm being. Feel free to come up to me and say hi or whatever. I love you all. And that's what you're saying. But anytime you make yourself a public figure, just by being out there, if you say, I don't want to see anybody, I paid to be on this TV right now because I want to let you know, I don't want to see anybody. Within a day or two, if you're going to have a few people come up and say, hey, I saw you on TV. You said you didn't want to see anybody, but you weren't talking about me. Hey, I can have your autograph. The price of fame is a high one. And the other thing is, after you get a certain amount of money that you have, how much more if you've got ability to buy anything in the world that you want, what good is money? I mean, how much more do you need? I do hope that in retirement, I have no idea what his schedule was, but I do hope that in retirement he found some peace and some time and quiet and whatever, and he had a good relationship, has loved ones that he could count on, that he could love and that loved him. I hope the best. He made money for everybody. He was good for the wrestling business. If it changes, some people say, oh, it's ruined now because everybody's doing this. Yeah, well, I don't care if it's ruined or not. If it's ruined, what happens when whatever they're doing now stops drawing? They're going to change things.
Yeah.
And that's the way the businesses, you know enough about it. The businesses have evolved 2 or 3 times since I started in it.
Yeah.
Going holes to high spots, back to holes. Lucha Libre to grab a hold. Yeah, it depends on what people are paying to see.
Yeah.
So
at the end of the day, the fans determine what the product's going to be long term.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad you gave me a chance to say something nice about Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan.
We told the story about, Hogan wanting to break in and you being there initially and kind of being told, go in there and handle business. And you kind of refrained from doing that. But Hulk comes back and everybody's heard the story by now of the hero Matsuda breaking his leg, but Hogan went back and he went home and he trained, brother, and he maybe played a little bass in between, but he finally got back in the ring and he broke into the business, and the rest is history. And Bob, I'm glad we had an opportunity to talk a little bit about Hulk this week, and even the Hall of Fame as well that you got to attend. So that's going to do it here for this week, though. I think we're going to wrap things up at this point. And when we return, we'll likely begin discussing your time working your way into the global wrestling promotion there in the late 1980s down there in Florida. So we talked a little bit about you running into Boris Malenko and kind of working your way into the group, but we're going to expound upon that on the next episode. But until then, I think it's time to say goodbye. I think we can leave on a high note here talking, I can't get much higher than talking about the Hulkster. And, unfortunately, it's his recent passing. But I'm glad we had an opportunity to discuss it here on the program.
Well, we had a chance to pay our respects.
Yeah.
And frankly, my respects weren't all that high, but you raised them quite a bit. And I thank you for that. I like to think well of people. I would hate to think, I felt in ways. Some people listen to me think, Bob, you're crazy. Guy was a billionaire, well, not a millionaire. I thought in some ways his life was a tragedy. Let's put it this way. It would have been for me to never be able to have privacy, to always be, no matter where I am. I'm on the third floor in the bathroom, but I happen to leave the window open. I look out there and there's a guy up in a tree taking pictures of me through the window because you're so famous.
Yeah.
So it was nice to be able to say some nice things. And again, I appreciate your efforts to make this work, Ray, and what we both appreciate, I'm sure, I can speak for Ray in saying this, those of you out there listening to us, we're in this together, and we really appreciate the fact that you will take your time to listen to what we have to say, and there'll be some time in the future where we'll write in questions again, right, Ray?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we've got a few still we'll be getting to here pretty soon.
So we'll have a chance to almost speak to you personally. But for now, please stay well. My best wishes to you and yours. I hope you and all your families are well and stay that way.